Welcome back. So you are survivors from yesterday's class. So as we move forward in our discussion today, I'll first do a quick recap of where we are in the Bhagavad Gita. So in the first session, we focused on how the Bhagavad Gita is a guidebook for decision making. That Arjuna is facing a very painful situation. That the Gita is going to give him guidance in a situation of agony, where there is two options and both have some merit to them and both have some pain associated with them. So he's not able to decide. And then in answering Arjuna's question, Krishna starts by showing, we discussed a key point is education means to show the complexity in the simple, in what seems simple, and then to show the simplicity in what seems complex. So right now Krishna is going to the first stage, that Krishna is actually showing the complexity in what seems simple. Because for Arjuna, what seemed simple was, he is saying that, okay, renouncing, that's better than working. Because in working, we are seeking something. This is Arjuna's conception. And this is so much better. But Krishna is saying, not so simple. We discussed that there are various levels within it. So, Krishna talks about working with detachment. So, we talk about in work, there are three categories. You remember three categories in work? Sinful, attached, and detached. And in renunciation, premature and mature. So till now, Krishna has discounted premature renunciation. He has said that, and Arjuna also agrees that that is not to be done. Krishna mentions in 3.6. Then sinful action, neither Arjuna wants to do it, nor Krishna wants to do it. Now Arjuna and Krishna may have different understandings of what is sinful. Arjuna thinks that fighting will be sinful, but Krishna tells him not fighting will be sinful, because you will be being irresponsible. We discussed about how yesterday so police who do nothing while rioters are rioting, they will be culpable for that. So Arjuna was thinking fighting is sinful. Krishna says not fighting can be sinful. But either way, any action that is sinful, neither of them want to do it. Now attached action, that Arjuna also, once Krishna introduces the idea of the soul, then he says, yeah, the soul is, we pursue something eternal. So in detached action, there are two categories. Which are the two? Anyone remembers? Karma yoga and Bhakti yoga. Excellent. And in mature renunciation, there are two. Dhyan yoga and Gyan yoga. Excellent. You got a very good summary of the Gita now. So now, while Arjuna now recognizes the nuances of action, Gahana Karmano Gati, and he recognizes that detached action has its merit. So we discussed about detached action as a means to, when we say we are detached, that means if there is an action, there could be various levels of result from that action. There is immediate result. There is intermediate result. And then there is ultimate result. So, the immediate result, Krishna says, have equanimity. Sukhe dukhe same krutva. Don't be too attached to it. Why don't be attached? Because the immediate result doesn't depend on our actions alone. Our present actions matter, but our past actions also matter. So be equipoised, equanimity. Now intermediate result is what? We want to decondition ourselves. Not condition but decondition. Decondition means purification. So we want to purify ourselves. Purify means we all, like water purified means water is returned to its natural condition. Water that is impure means it has contaminations in it. So like that, actions that we do can either increase the contamination within us or decrease the contamination within us. So this Krishna talks about it, as mentioned in 5.11, the 5th chapter. Krishna answers the question from a different perspective. Kayena manasa buddhya kevalair indriyairapi yoginah karma kurvanti sangam tyaktvatma shuddhayet. So he says that the yogis work with their body, mind and even their senses, but they are working not for indulgence but for purification. Let us recite this verse. Kayena manasa buddhya. So kaya is the body, manasa is the mind, buddhya is the intelligence. Then kevalai. Kevalai is even or also with. Indriyairapi, even with the senses. Kevalair indriyairapi. Yoginah karma kurvanti. Sangam tyaktvatma shuddhaye. The yogis do work for what? For purification. So it's interesting. Yesterday we were talking about being detached. Being detached doesn't mean being irresponsible. It doesn't mean being not caring at all. So it's in the same line over here. Two almost opposite things are being talked about. Sangam tyaktva. They are giving up attachment and they are seeking purification. So now you will say attachment means attached to the results. So they're giving up the attachment to the results, but at the same time they are seeking a result. The result of purification. So basically what is being said over here is the immediate results, don't be attached to it. Don't be fixated on it. Focus on the bigger term result, the longer term results. Just like a student who is studying, if a student is constantly worried, okay, if I study this, will I get marks? If I study this, I'll get marks. And this will not come in the exam, so I won't study it. Okay, if a student is not really interested in the subject and doesn't want to pursue any further studying the subject, the student can be only marks oriented. But if the student wants to make a career in that subject, if a student say, if you are learning some software coding, not just to pass an exam, but you want to have a job in that field, then just studying so that you can pass the exam, just getting marks, will not be enough. You need to know the subject. Now, ideally speaking, you can say getting marks and getting mastery of the subject can both go together. That's possible. But sometimes some students may get marks in the exam, but they don't have much mastery over the subject. And sometimes some students may get mastery over the subject, but they are not too marks oriented. So it's possible. So it's not that the immediate and the intermediate results, they can go together. It's like both can go in the same direction, or one can go in another direction, one can go in the other direction. Sometimes one can go in one direction and the other can go in the opposite direction also. Like say someone wants to someone fakes that they know something. They go for a particular interview and they have been told what are the questions they're going to ask in the interview. And they prepare all the answers to those questions. And they knock the ball out of the park, as they say in baseball. They just crack the interview completely. They may crack the interview, but they're not really studied the subject. And once they get to the job, they crack the interview and the job will crack them afterwards. Isn't it? So, the immediate and the intermediate. Ideal is they both go together. But we focus on the bigger term rather than the short term. Now, it is possible that we can engage our senses in a way that we get the immediate results and we get purification also. But we shouldn't pursue the immediate results so much. What does immediate results mean for the senses? It means that we do the things that are enjoyable for us. Now, some things could be, like some food can be delicious and it can be nutritious also. So it gives us pleasure right now and it promotes our health also. So it's not that the immediate and the intermediate have to be contradictory. But sometimes, especially if a person is recovering from health, recovering from sickness, then they may need to favor the nutritious food even if it is not delicious. So basically, Krishna is telling Arjuna that you focus on the bigger term picture. And even while he is doing it, so Arjuna still has this notion that, okay, detached work is good, but renunciation is better, isn't it? So, because Arjuna lives in a culture where the sadhus, the saints, the sages who renounce the world are respected. And he has seen even Krishna respect them. And even kings bow down to the sages when the sages visit them, or the sages when they go out to visit the sages. So Arjuna still thinks that the renunciation is better than work. So that is the question that is in Arjuna's mind. And that's the question which Krishna will address in chapter 6. So today we will focus on chapter 6 because that talks a lot about the mind. And that's a very relevant subject for us. And then in the second part of today's session, we'll try to cover chapters 7 to 10. And we'll see if we can, the 11th and 12th chapters, or Virat Purusha, universal form and Bhakti, we'll see how much we can cover those. So, yesterday I talked about how Krishna is an expert teacher. Does anyone remember what attribute of Krishna's teaching we discussed? Teaching expertise?
If the same question is asked, he will give different answer.
Different answer. Yes, answer from a different perspective. The different answer would create problems. Because then they'll come, which is the right answer then? So, now, see, one of the ways of being persuasive, that means, one way is to tell, the other is to show. In writing, this is the principle, don't tell, but show. Instead of saying, if somebody is writing a novel and say, he was very angry. Instead, you can say that, his eyes turned red, he was clenching his jaw, his fists were clenched so tight that it seemed as if blood was dripping from his face. The vein on his forehead was throbbing. Now, all that indicates that the person is angry. So, it is much better generally to show than to tell. So, similarly, when we are giving guidance, so one is to give instruction. The other is to give vision. Instruction means tell them do this, don't do this. Vision means, okay, you yourself see. If you do this, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. Now, if you do this, this is what it implies. If you do this, this is what it implies. Now you decide what you want to do. Now, among giving instruction, giving vision, which is likely to be more persuasive? Giving vision. Because then the person arrives at their own decision. So, Krishna will follow this principle over here. In the 6th chapter, Arjuna is still operating under the idea that, renunciation is better. And it is true that renunciation is generally considered a more advanced stage. But Arjuna is at a particular stage in his life. And for him, when he is a householder, for him, renouncing would neither be personally or socially suitable for him. Krishna wants Arjuna to do his duty in the world. So the 6th chapter, see, basically Karma Yoga, from Karma Yoga it goes to Bhakti Yoga. To Dhyan Yoga. So chapters 2 to 5 are talking about Karma Yoga, more or less. And then chapter 6 talks about Dhyan Yoga. So when he talks about Dhyan Yoga, let's see how he goes about his discussion. So Krishna starts by telling Arjuna that even to practice Dhyan Yoga, first one has to calm one's mind. So, the idea is Dhyan Yoga, it's a process largely of solitary meditation. One goes into a jungle and sits down in a yogic posture. Normally, only in yoga schools or yoga training sessions, you will see a series of people sitting together and do yogic asanas. If you see any traditional images of yoga yogis, they are alone. You don't see yogis in a group doing group exercises. So, traditional yoga practice, see what has happened is yoga traditionally was a spiritual practice for liberation from material existence. Now, today it has become a physical practice for material benefits. The benefits could be many. They could be health, they could be fitness, they could be looks. So the purpose has changed. In the Gita, Krishna is talking about yoga for a spiritual purpose. And he says to go to jungle and sit alone in meditation. And that's the point. He says before one can sit alone in meditation, he says that we have to be able to sit alone peacefully with our own mind. The mind has to be peaceful enough. If the mind is not peaceful, then we may be in a peaceful place, but the mind will keep us agitated. In fact, we can say entertainment. Entertainment has been a part of human society always. Krishna also says, Yuktahara viharasya. So he says, it is a break from life's monotony. That's the way it is. It has been always people need some entertainment. But nowadays, if you consider for most people who are say into video gaming or just watching movies, binging on movies and things like that, it's almost like life is a break from entertainment. Like entertainment is the real thing, and occasionally you have a break from it. If you consider the amount of money that is spent on entertainment, one say big Hollywood movie is $200, $300 million, $500 million. So it's an astronomical amount of money. And Hollywood or Bollywood for that matter, they're not charitable endeavors. They're spending that much money because people are spending that much money. People are ready to pay for it. And why are people ready to pay for it? Because everyone basically wants to get away from their mind. Most people cannot tolerate silence. Most people cannot tolerate being with their mind. Because the mind, this person said this, and what if that happens, and what if that happens, what if that happens? And then the more the mind is agitated, the more we become desperate to get away from the mind. So we desperately want to get away from our mind. And now, getting away from the mind, what happens? The more, if the entertainment itself is not very entertaining. I was in America and I had a number of college programs. So I was going for one college program. I asked the organizers, which college is this? They said it is the American Institute of Illusion. So that is basically the place where they train people to make movies. So it's the Institute of Illusion. So now there are movies which are blockbusters. And what is the opposite of something which is a blockbuster? Yeah, there's a new word called flopbuster also. So now why many movies flop? Why do they flop? Because the illusion is not good enough. That means the characters are not engaging enough, the plot is not believable, whatever it is. So the illusion has to be interesting enough to catch people's attention. Otherwise, people will not stay engaged in it. So, as the mind requires more and more distraction, so what happens? The illusion has to be more and more captivating. So, like the mind is agitated, and for the mind, when the agitated mind is there, we can have a pain medication for it, or we can have a curative medication for it. So the entertainment is like the pain medication. Now if somebody is taking only a pain medication, then what happens? They may feel better temporarily, but after some time, the pain recurs. And not only recurs, it worsens. And then next time, the same level pain medication doesn't work. You need more pain medication. And that's why we see now the entertainment is becoming more and more aggressive, more and more sensual, more and more violent, more and more agitating, stimulating. Why? Because the mind is so agitated that people need something sufficiently agitating to distract them from their mind. So traditionally India had two painkillers. One was Bollywood, the second was cricket. About 15 years, both of them got married. And they had a child. That was IPL. So, that's like a super painkiller. So, the idea is that we need more and more pain medication. But no matter how much pain medication we have, eventually it doesn't work. Because the cure is not there. So the curative medication for the mind is actually enlightenment. We'll talk about what enlightenment means in due course. Now, in an ideal program, if there is a proper medical program, there will be pain medication also and curative medication also. So even in spiritual culture, there is entertainment. We can have music, we can have dramas, we can have movies, we can have dance, singing, all that can be there. But the focus is not entertainment. The focus has to be enlightenment. The curative medicine is generally if it takes some treatment. The pain medication is relatively cheaper. The curative medicine is a little more expensive. But both are required. So now, what Krishna is, why am I discussing all this about the mind over here is, Krishna is basically telling Arjuna that if you renounce before your mind has become peaceful enough, then your mind will eat you up. See, for most of us, what happens is that our sanity is preserved by our association. Our mind can propose many things, but most of the times, say all of you are sitting here right now, every one of you is reasonably confident that the person next to you is not going to turn at you and slap you in the face. Now, is that possible? Well, you could say anything is possible. But if people have come for a spiritual talk like this, we understand in this association, there will be a certain kind of behavior that is expected. So for most of us, our mind may propose hundreds of things, but we regulate our mind based on what people will say, what is appropriate in the context. So if I get angry, if someone gets angry and they feel like speaking some swear words, some profanity, and if they are in a cultured society, or maybe if their children are in front of them, see, I don't want to speak such words in front of my children. So what happens is, our mind can propose many devilish things, but people who are around us, they act as a censor for our mind. Now this can work against us also sometimes. People can inhibit somebody from doing creative things. But for a large part, Many of the distracting or destructive impulses that come from our mind, they are checked by association. Say, that's why if you consider the mind, it can give us distraction, it can cause us destruction. The range can be wide. But say if I am studying alone, or say we are trying to practice meditation alone, we are doing some mantra chanting, and then suddenly we get the urge, maybe I might have got some phone message, or let me see what's there on Facebook, this, that, we pick up, and then we might just get distracted. I saw one cartoon of multitasking in Bhakti, it was called. So it was basically somebody was doing aarti to the deities, and they're looking at the phone with the other hand. Now, nobody would do like this because that's clearly a spiritual activity. But if we went to a temple and we saw a pujari doing like that, we would be outraged, isn't it? You cannot do like this. So the idea is the society around us, our mind can distract us in many ways. If I want to meditate, I get the urge. Okay, just watch some news, do this, do that. But if I'm doing meditation with some other people around me, they will notice. I should not be doing this. So whether it is some small distractions or it is a large distraction, I get angry and I feel like throwing things and beating people up. But then if I am in a respectable society, I won't do it. So basically, outer association is a protection from our mind's distractiveness or destructiveness, both. For most of the times. So Krishna says, when can we actually be alone? When our mind is no longer pushing us toward distraction or destruction. When our mind has become peaceful enough, it is steady enough. Then, now we all need some alone time, that is different. But here Krishna is talking about a spiritual practice where completely renouncing the world, a person, the rest of their life, they just want to be alone and do some spiritual focus. So here this is not easy. Now it's interesting, Krishna does not say it is not easy. Krishna only describes it. And Krishna uses a very interesting strategy over here. I won't go into the various specifics of what Krishna talks about. But Krishna is like 10 to 15. First, he starts from the practice and he gives the perfection. Then, from 16 to 23, again he starts with the seeker stage and he gets to the seer stage. And then again from 24 to 32, again he starts with the initial stage and he gets to the final stage. So in one sense, Krishna is describing the same path but in multiple ways. And each of these times in this perfectional stage, he emphasizes equality of vision. And especially that emphasis comes in 30, 31, 32 and 32nd verse especially, where he says the yogi. Now interestingly, before Krishna starts this in the 9th verse and the last verse, that is 32nd verse, both of them have this same theme. 9th verse is Suhrun Mitrarya Uddasina Madhyastha Dvesha Bandhushu, that friends, enemies, intermediate people, treat all of them equally. And 32nd verse is Atmopamyena Sarvatra Samam Pashyati Arjuna, see everyone equally. And this is where Arjuna says, Arjuna himself states, hey, this is not practical for me. He says, how can I possibly see Yudhishthir, who is so virtuous, and Duryodhana, who is so vicious? How can I see both of them equally? So, basically, Krishna describes the physical aspect of yoga, going to a forest, sitting down in meditation, and that is not what intimidates Arjuna. Now, in fact, Arjuna has done that before. Arjuna has been in the forest, He has done austerity so that he can please the devatas, get some weapons. So what Arjuna feels is difficult. Sorry. What Arjuna feels is difficult is not the physical aspect of the yoga. It is the mental aspect. The mental aspect is equal vision. So the physical aspect is austerity. Austerity is like sitting in a yoga posture and living in a forest. That Arjuna has done. This is not what is difficult, but the mental aspect is equality of vision. And now if we literally see Arjuna's description, when he says, my mind is chanchalam himana Krishna pramati balabhadrada. My mind is restless, it is mad, it is obstinate. If we decontextualize it and look at this verse itself, if this was spoken therapist's place, somebody speaks this to a therapist, they say, maybe you got ADHD, maybe you need to be admitted in some mental health care facility. Saying my mind is restless, my mind is wild, my mind is stubborn. Now, if we look at Arjuna's life, Arjuna has been a very disciplined person. In fact, we know earlier when Arjuna was practicing archery, most of us know that incident. His guru asked, what do you see? And all the other students said that, okay, we see the forest, we see the tree, we see the branches. What did Arjuna say? I see only the eye of the bird. So that was the focus of Arjuna. So when Arjuna is saying my mind is restless, it's not a state where Arjuna has an uncontrolled mind which is making him dysfunctional. He's saying specifically, if I try to have equality of vision towards everyone, I can't do that. Like for all of us, we can be kind to people. But if somebody has hurt us terribly, and they tell them, be polite with that person, and it feels like a burning sensation. No, I want to yell at this person. So especially there are certain things which trigger strong emotions within us. And at that time to stay calm is difficult. So now, is it possible to see Duryodhan and Yudhishthir? How can they be seen equally? Well, this is possible when one has actually come to the level of renunciation. At the level of renunciation, what happens is, one understands, Yudhishthira is definitely a virtuous person, Duryodhan is a vicious person. But when one comes to the level of renunciation, one has to understand that both virtue and vice are ultimately inconsequential. That good and bad, both of them are temporary. And somebody may be kind, somebody may be mean. But it's all, because it's in the temporary domain, it doesn't matter. Now it's very difficult for us to perceive it that way. And if we can't perceive it that way, then Krishna is saying basically, if you are a warrior, see a warrior, a protector, cannot see a criminal and a law abider equally. They would fail in their duty. But if you renounce the world, okay, in the world always there will be some lawbreakers, there will be some law abiders, and this is how the world goes on. I want to focus on my spiritual business. So it's like, I'll put it another way, if we are here, then the dualities of the world affect us a lot. So friends are wonderful, enemies are dreadful. But if we are over here, way above, we are at a level of consciousness. It's like if I am in the ocean, then the crest and the trough of the wave matters a lot. But if I am in the sky, then neither the crest nor the trough makes much difference. Because in the ocean I am in the sky. So Krishna is saying that if you want to renounce the world, you have to have that elevated consciousness, that equality of vision by which you can see everyone equally. And Arjuna says that's not possible for you. So Krishna does not tell Arjuna, don't renounce the world. Krishna tells Arjuna what is required for renouncing the world. Now later on, Krishna will talk about devotional renunciation, which is different. Here is talking more about impersonal solitary renunciation. So then when Arjuna says, this is very difficult for me to do, Krishna in one sense is non-committally focused. He says, it's possible by detachment and by practice, abhyasa and vairagya. Now what is this abhyasa and vairagya? That will be revealed later. But it's basically, he's saying that you continue, abhyasa means do the right thing, vairagya means stay away from the wrong thing. And then you will grow. So then Arjuna has two questions. So we are looking at, in this 6th chapter, I'm looking at Krishna's expertise in teaching. So first is, he lets Arjuna come to the answer. Like I said, he gives vision instead of instruction. Then after that, when Krishna says, you continue the do's and continue the don'ts, it will happen. So Arjuna has two questions, which cause him some hesitation. So the essence of those two questions is, basically, there are two questions, but there's one underlying thing over here. How long? Generally, the mind that is attached, no, it doesn't want to work, and it certainly doesn't want to wait. We want immediate results. So Arjuna says, how long will it take for me? So what if I practice throughout my life, but if I don't get the results, then what will happen to me? What if I die? Will I just be lost completely? No. So then Krishna answers the question. And even when he answers the question, so here, again, when I talk about education, education has to have, earlier I talked about complexity and simplifying, that's more of the mode of education. But it has to have enlightenment, what to do, and encouragement. That you can do it. Say if somebody has become very injured because of some accident or something like that, and they are struggling to gain back mobility. Then you tell them, okay, you do this exercise, take this medication, take this diet, you'll become healthy. But then they say, I can't even move my hands right now. They need encouragement. So when to give encouragement and when to give enlightenment, that's important. So when Arjuna is thinking, what if it takes so long for me? I won't be able to do it. So first and foremost, Krishna in 640 gives encouragement. What does he say? This is one of the sweetest and most encouraging verses in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says here that one who does good, O my friend, will never meet with evil. Let's recite this verse. Parthanaiveha namutra vinashastasya vidyate nahi kalyana krit kaschet durgatim tata gacchati. Would anyone like to read the translation?
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said,
Yeah, please.
Son of Pritha,
Go ahead.
Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction, either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil.
So, one who does good is never overcome by evil. Suppose somebody is very agitated. I got this tumor, is it cancer? The doctor may have to pacify. It's alright. It's alright, it's not a serious thing. Then the doctor may tell, okay, it is a cancer, but it's in the first stage, you can cure it. First pacify and then explain. So that is the approach that Krishna is taking over here. He says, first pacify Arjuna. And then he says, basically Arjuna's question is that if I am practicing spirituality, what if I can't complete it? What if it takes too long to purify my mind, to get liberated, and by the time I die, I'm not yet liberated, I'm not yet pure enough to be liberated? Then what will happen? So Krishna, after giving this education, then he gives a trajectory of what can happen. So he talks about two possibilities. One is, this is going to come in the 8th chapter, but I'll explain it over here. See, the way it is described is that this is the earth, above this is heaven. The cosmos that is described in the Bhagavad Gita, and below is hell. And beyond all this is the spiritual world. So the earth and everything within it, the earth is a part of, this is called the material world. Now the heaven is a place where there's much more pleasure, but heaven is not the kingdom of God. Heaven is like a resort. You can go to the resort, enjoy, but once your budget is over, then you have to go back home. So it's like from earth, you may go to heaven when you do some punya. So basically punya is good work. Punya can take us to heaven, but it is bhakti, it is love for God, it is spirituality that can take us to the spiritual world. Now of course, if one does wrong activities, harmful activities, strict activities, papa, that takes one to hell. But this is a broad understanding of the cosmos that is given in the Gita. But the key point over here is, Krishna says that depending on if somebody is practicing spirituality, now they may not attain spiritual success in broadly two situations. One is they just started the practice and they have a lot of worldly desires still remaining. The other is they've done a lot of practice, they don't have any worldly desires, but they're just not yet there. So in these two cases, the trajectory is different. First is that if someone has a lot of worldly desires, still, they practice spirituality, but they have worldly desires. Oh, I want fame, I want wealth, I want sensual pleasure. Then Krishna says, for them, for such a yogi, consider two yogis over here. This yogi will go to heaven, will stay in heaven for a long time, and then be born on the earth. And from here, they will go to the spiritual world. So he says, they had some desires for worldly pleasure, they can fulfill those desires. And they can sate those desires, satisfy those desires, then they come back to earth. So they don't lose anything. Whatever spiritual credits they have, they will continue with that. The other is the earthly domain itself. If we consider the earthly domain, we could put one level, but the earthly domain itself can be at multiple levels. It's like in the earth itself, there are people who are very tamasic. Tamasic means they are so much in the mode of ignorance that they have no conception of anything higher in life. And one of my friends in Russia was telling that he was speaking in a class, you are not your body. You are not your body. And a person in the audience said, if I am not my body, then whose body am I? So the idea of bodily identification was so strong that I have to be somebody. And then on this earth itself, we can have people who are spiritually evolved. In the Greek tradition, there is Socrates, who was supposed to be poisoned to death. And he was asked, are you not afraid of death? He says, first you have to catch me before you can kill me. He said, I understand I'm a spiritual being. So on the earth itself, there are people who can get very wide degrees of spiritual consciousness. So if somebody, while practicing their spirituality, they have evolved to a particular level, but they have not yet completed the journey. then in their next life, they will be born in a spiritually evolved family. And from there, they will continue their journey to the spiritual domain. So basically, the idea is that whatever spirituality one has practiced, that will never be lost. So Krishna assures Arjuna that in this way, whatever spirituality you practice, that will be for your permanent benefit. And with this reassuring note, now Krishna, in the last 2 verses of the 6th chapter, in this particular chapter of Dhyan Yoga, what is he talking about? He's talking about the mind. You try to bring equality of the mind, but if you can't bring the equality of the mind, he says just continue practice. What to practice? That Krishna will tell in the next chapters. But he says the spiritual path will eventually lead one to perfection. In the last few verses, he basically talks about that there are various spiritual paths. He gives a hierarchy in 46 and 47. And he says the yogi whose mind is fixed on Krishna is the highest yogi. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana. Among all yogis, the topmost yogi is one whose mind is fixed on me. And that will be the prelude for the next 6 chapters, which focus on Bhakti Yoga. And so Krishna has given indirectly an answer to Arjuna about what is the path he should follow. He'll make it more explicit later. That Arjuna said, this path of yoga is very difficult for me to follow. Krishna says, okay, but be patient, be persistent, and you will be purified. But patient and persistent in which path? That Krishna will recommend later. So I'll make one last point about this particular chapter, and then we will open for question answers. See, here in this particular point that Krishna talks about the abhyasa and vairagya. This can be understood this can be translated in many different ways. And the idea is we want to understand what it means for us practically. So basically, the mind, the Gita explains, our existence is 3 level. That the soul, there is the mind, and there is the body. The soul, body, and in between is the mind. So the soul, if you consider computer metaphor, the soul is like the user, the body is like the hardware, the mind is like the software. So now, our mind, so what I'm trying to do over here, this whole idea of transforming our mind. How does this happen? What does abhyasa and vairagya mean? So, the mind is like a software. And software is programmed. And it is programmable. Or you can say reprogrammable. Suppose I have my phone. Suppose somebody on their phone has visited a particular website. Have any of you heard of this? Okay. So, suppose somebody has visited a website called Bollywood.com. And now they come for a spiritual talk like this. And then they hear about Bhagavad Gita. They say, okay, I want to know what is Bhagavad Gita. And they open their computer browser and they type B. And what happens? The Bollywood comes as autocomplete. Now they didn't want to go to Bollywood.com. They wanted to go to BhagavadGita.com, but Bollywood came as an autocomplete. Why is that? That's programmed that way. Their past history is stored in the browser. And the past history is offered as an autocomplete. So similarly for us, every action, so what is like a software's history is like the mind's impressions. The impressions in the Sanskrit is called samskar. Hmm? And everybody has some scar. Everybody's mind has some or the other scar. We are all scarred in some way or the other. So that means each one of us, based on the kind of actions that we have done in the past, our mind will push us in particular directions. Say, whenever I'm bored, if my tendency has been, okay, look at some political news, look at some Bollywood news, look at some sports news, then as soon as I feel a little bored, immediately that autocomplete will be, okay, open this app, open this website, watch this, do this. So it's almost, yesterday I talked about free will and evil, you remember that? Yes. So in this case, the free will is to go towards bhagavadgita.com, but the evil is taking me towards bollywood.com. So the mind is programmed. And because the mind is programmed in a particular way, it pushes us in particular directions. Now, what do we do about this programming? If it were a browser, we could just say delete history, uninstall the browser, wipe out the device clean. None of those are possible with respect to our mind. No, everything that we do, it's impressed in our mind. And while the mind is programmed, it is programmable. So abhyas and vairagya. So abhyas and vairagya, if we consider this browser example. So if somebody wants to go to bhagavadgita.com and they type B and bollywood.com, what is the way? They have to type full Bhagavad Gita.com. It's like VHAGVADGITA. It can seem like 11 letters. My God, kitna mehnat hai. But just type that once, type that twice, type that thrice. If we visit that 5 times, afterwards when we type B, both will come as autocomplete. Maybe still bollywood.com might be the first as autocomplete, but Bhagavata will also come. If we do it 10 times, maybe do it 25 times, then after some time, Bhagavata.com will come as the first autocomplete. So abhyas is basically persistence. Just persistence in doing what we know is good for us. The way to change the conditioning of our mind is just be persistent. We have to just keep doing again and again. So when we chant the Hare Krishna mantra, we are doing japa again and again and again. Our mind may go here, mind may go there. Just persistence. Just keep chanting the mantra. We want to create new impressions in our mind. And vairagya. Vairagya means abstinence. Abstinence means to refrain from doing something. Like when I type B, each time I type B, Bollywood.com comes as autocomplete. But I abstain from pressing enter. I can feel like pressing enter, but no. So whenever we feel a little bored, okay, I want to watch this, I want to touch this, I want to eat this, all those propositions will come from our mind. But abstinence. So persistence and abstinence, both of these together will take us towards transcendence. Transcendence means eventually our mind will become transformed. If somebody has visited bhagavadgita.com say 100 times, then after that time when I type B, Bollywood will not come as an option only. So for each one of us, when we practice spirituality, we will experience transformation. It just depends on how deep the conditioning is. Say if somebody has visited Bollywood.com 10 times, then they just visit bhagavadgita.com 10 times and Bollywood.com disappears. But somebody else has visited Bollywood.com 1,000 times. And then they visit bhagavadgita.com 10 times, still Bollywood.com keeps coming up. But that doesn't mean their visiting 10 times is in vain. Every one of us, we will be transformed. So each time from within us, the urge comes. If somebody doesn't listen to us, we feel like yelling at them. And then, just when you feel like yelling, you say, I'll take a deep breath. Maybe I'll chant Hare Krishna in my mind. I'll calm myself down. Now, each time we do that, we are creating a new impression within us. Now, for some of us, just doing it a few times, and the urge to yell at others may go away. For some of us, the urge may still be there. It may take more time. But the transformation will happen. And for us, to keep faith in this process, we need to pat ourselves on the back, not in a self-complacent sense, but in a sense of encouragement. This process works. We all need to encourage ourselves, because it's very easy to become discouraged. So for encouraging ourselves, we have to focus on the evidence of the process working, and not on the evidence of the process not working. What do I mean by this? Process working and process not working. Say, some of us, this is just one example, but each of us can apply different examples. Some of us may have been, say, eating meat before we started spiritual practices. And now, say, if you have been practicing spiritualities for some time, if you are traveling in a train or a plane, somebody in the neighborhood sitting next to us starts eating meat, we may not even feel tempted at all. That's okay, that's not something to do. Maybe earlier I was craving for it, but now I have no temptation for it. On the other hand, say, we might be habituated to watching a lot of movies, and now I don't want to spend my time in that. We decide that. But say if we are going in a plane and the person next to us in their tablet or in their TV on the phone watching some movie, we might get attracted, we might get distracted. So we may say, oh, I am doing spiritual practices, why am I not getting detached? Why am I still attracted by those things? Well, it depends. So we can look at the evidence where the transformation has happened for us. And if we look at this evidence, we will be encouraged. If we look at this evidence, we'll feel, oh, this process is not working. Now, rather than seeing that the process is not working, all that it means is we need to keep working. The conditioning in that particular area may be deeper. But this abhyasa and vairagya, this persistence in doing what is right and abstinence from what we know is bad. If we just keep doing this, gradually anyone and everyone can be transformed. And therein lies the hope for every one of us. Some of us may have greed, some of us may have jealousy, some of us may have lust, some of us may have anger, some of us may have low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, whatever issues we may have. That's just a conditioning of our mind. And the good thing is, every conditioning can be changed. So we may be a worrier. The tendency is, what if this goes wrong, that goes wrong, that goes wrong. Okay, that's the tendency of our mind to worry. Doesn't matter. Don't get too worked up about it. Just try to focus on Krishna. Just try to connect with Krishna. And if we do that, gradually the worrying tendency will go down. The mind will become transformed. So this chapter, essentially what it says is that the mind is transformable. And that is our great hope. Each one of us, we can transform our mind by gradual, by persistent spiritual practice and abstinence as much as is possible from the things that will reinforce the negativity within our mind. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. We discussed chapter 6. I talked about 3 main points today. The first point was about the mind and solitude. That in general, our mind's craziness can be ranging from distraction to destruction. Most of the times, we are protected by association. the people around our mind may be uncivilized. Yell at someone, scream, do this, do that. But the people around us, the association that we are in, that restrains our minds while it surges. That's why the only time the mind, we can actually, solitude is possible when the mind has become peaceful. Otherwise, we talked about how much entertainment is basically because we can't be alone with our mind. Our mind is so distracting, so agitating that we have to just get away from our mind. And that's why entertainment is like a pain medication, which we keep needing more and more pain medication. It's a pain medication that ultimately doesn't work. So then the second point I discussed is how the best persuasion, if you want to persuade someone, it is tell or show. Which is better? Show, yes. So tell is giving instruction. Do this, don't this. Show is giving vision. If you do this, this will happen. If you do this, it will happen. So Krishna in chapter 6, he shows Arjuna the price or the requirement for solitary meditation. What is the requirement? Equality of vision. That to see Krishna, to see Arjuna should be able to see Duryodhan and Yudhishthira equally. And he says, that is not possible for me. So Arjuna himself says, okay, what can I do? What is the alternative? So, okay, the third point here is, how long will it take? Will it take too long? And Krishna says that education means we need to give both encourage and enlighten. So Krishna enlightens in terms of 41 to 45, but 40th verse in the 6th chapter, he's encouraging. We discussed how the two trajectories, you go to heaven, come back, and then continue spirituality. And then continue to go to a spiritual journey. The other is that on the earth itself, we rise from a spiritually unevolved to a spiritually evolved place, and from there we continue our spirituality. And the last part discussed was about transforming the mind. The two directives of Abhyas and Vairagya. So the mind is like a software, and the software can be reprogrammed. So we reprogram through basically two steps. First is persistence. That just keep visiting bhagavad-gita.com. Just keep doing the right thing. And even if the other urge comes up, abstinence. Even if bollywood.com comes as autocomplete, don't press the enter. And now how much persistence and how much abstinence will be required, that will vary from person to person. But we focus on the evidence of the process working. And otherwise, there's more working needed. So this will encourage us to keep our faith and move on. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. In US, there was a case of a criminal who was put in jail, and he did a lot of bad to a lot of people, physically speaking. And his case was studied. He had some deformance on the frontal lobe of his brain that he could not process. He didn't have empathy. He could not relate to the fact that this causes pain and suffering to others. For him, that was pleasurable, and he has a life sentence in jail, and there was a conversation going on. He seems such a personality? Because you wrote this statement that everyone's mind can change. So immediately that come up into my mind.
So everyone's mind can change, but some minds may not change in this lifetime. So Krishna tried to persuade Duryodhana. Lord Ram gave so many options to Ravan to peacefully return Sita. They just didn't listen. The specific thing you are talking about is sociopaths. Now, sociopaths, it seems that their conscience, it's almost missing. But it's what has happened is it has become deadened. Conscience is the voice from within which deters us when we do something bad. Now, conscience is also programmable. What do I mean by programmable? Say, if somebody is in a cultured society, that person first time speaks a profanity and maybe speaks some swear words or whatever. Now, maybe that person is in a powerful position. So, even if they speak such words, people are shocked, but nobody can speak against that person. So, first time they speak something and somebody else them is shocked. They also notice that, but they neglect it. They don't know anything about it. So, first time they will feel a little bad about it, but second time they speak it, they'll feel a little less bad. Third time, they don't feel bad. Fourth time, maybe 10th time, it's like sometimes I'm shocked that you find this shocking. One person says, and the other person says, I'm shocked that you don't find this shocking. Isn't it? That's complete different value system. Same thing. Why is it different? Because the person has deadened themselves to it. Deadened themselves to it. One of my friends is in the army. He told me that first time you have to kill someone. Even if somebody like a battle hardened, they know that they have to fight and kill. So it's painful. There's a life over there, and that it's true that if I don't kill that person is going to kill me. But even knowing that, killing someone is difficult. But it's after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Eventually, they just become deadened to it. So those people who are sociopaths, those who seem to have that incapacity to experience others' pain, that is because maybe from their previous life, also they've been doing things like that. And in this life, now that faculty is almost deadened. But it is there, but maybe in this life it may not be activated. That's why we have, when Narad Muni speaks with Mrugari, he doesn't appeal to his conscience. Why are you causing so much pain? He just says, if you're killing, just kill them completely. And now this is unexpected advice. You think that the sage will tell me, don't kill. But this sage is not giving a moralizing sermon. He says, kill completely. He says, you are a hunter, it's your job to kill. So to whatever extent, that is acceptable. But if you are causing deliberate pain to others, that will lead to severe reactions for you. So I think maybe it's possible with some very saintly association, but sometimes it's very difficult. So certain conditionings may be such that in this lifetime they cannot be changed. But that doesn't mean that nothing about the mind can be changed. Maybe even if a person cannot develop empathy, but still a person who is rude can become polite. A person who is normally aggressive can become a little more restrained. Maybe they don't feel others' pain, but just for other reasons. Empathy is not the only reason for being disciplined and cultured in one's life. It could just be to live in respectable society, to grow in life. Ultimately, spiritual culture can help us in different ways. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. So we talked about the Samadarshana, and I just wanted to understand, what does that look like for us in our everyday life? We got the extreme examples of Yudhishthira and Duryodhana, virtuous and vicious, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I guess for ourselves, we know the importance of association. So in one way, we want to see everybody as equal, but at the same time, we're associating with certain people. So I guess, how do we interact with, or do we avoid?
Okay.
What does that look like?
Okay, good question. Say, and answer the Samadarshinaha at 3 different levels or 3 different perspectives. First is in potentiality. Potentiality means that we see that everyone has spiritual potential. That everybody is a soul, everybody is a part of God, and everybody has spiritual potential. We often judge people based on externals. Oh, this person is from this region, this person is from this religion, this person is from this educational background, this person is from this income level. And we categorize people. But in terms of potentiality, it's universal. We see when Srila Prabhupada went to America, the first students that he got were people from the counterculture, the hippies. They would have seemed to be the unlikeliest of candidates. Because since Prabhupada had lived such a pure life, he had not even drunk tea or coffee throughout his life. And these people were their only regulative principle was to break all regulative principles. That was their situation. And yet, Prabhupada did not focus on all those things. He knew they were engaged in unrestrained sexual activity. He knew that they were into drugs. But what Prabhupada saw was, they are also souls. They have some spiritual interest, so let me fan that spiritual interest. So Prabhupada was Samadarshina in the sense that he did not look at externals. So basically see beyond externals. We see the internal spiritual potential of everyone. That's one level of understanding. Now, having said that, so in terms of being non-sectarian, in terms of being egalitarian, in terms of being universal, this gives a very strong philosophical foundation for having an equal vision. And today's world, when there's so much sectarianism, people label each other, you are like this, you are like that, and that leads to so much conflict. So we see, if we can see beyond externals, it's a very powerful thing. Now we see the potentiality, but while Samadarshinaha, it is not Samavartinaha. Samavartinaha is same action. It is that when a saintly person sees say a dog and an elephant and a cow, that's what is described in that verse. Now we could have a tiger and a cat. Now if a cat comes in our kitchen and the cat is looking for some milk and I want to go and drink milk, just clap, the cat will go away. But if a big cat, a tiger comes in our house and clap, we will go away. So, at a practical level, differentiation is required. Especially if somebody is living inside the world. If somebody is functioning in a responsible role in society, then we can have equal vision. We can have equal vision, but reciprocal action. Not necessarily equal action. That's why Krishna also says, Ye thamam prapatyante tam sathaiva bhajamyam. Krishna says, all living beings are my parts, but I respond to them the way they approach me. So equal vision does not have to translate necessarily into equal action. I can give equal opportunity to everyone, but then based on their disposition, my action will be reciprocal. So it's equality of vision that Krishna is talking about, not necessarily equality of action. But what Arjuna is saying is, even knowing it, to see Duryodhana as a soul and to see Yudhishthira as a soul and see both of them equally, that's difficult. Although intellectually I understand it, it's difficult. So we cannot have equality of vision. we cannot have equality of action. It's reciprocity of action. And the third point is that it depends on the level. In the Bhakti tradition, there is the Madhyamadhikari and then there is the Uttamadhikari. The Uttamadhikari is the transcendental devotee, completely. Madhyamadhikari is the intermediate level. So at the Uttamadhikari level, one just sees everyone as working under the will of God. One sees everyone like a devotee. So Haridas Thakur, when he was being beaten in those marketplaces, he just remained remembering the Lord. But when those people who were beating him said that if you don't die, then we will be killed. He says, I don't want you to die then. He entered into Samadhi. So there are saintly people who at a very exalted level, even if they are attacked, they will do nothing. However, if they want to share spiritual wisdom, then they come down from the Uttama level to the Madhyama level. At the Madhyama level, we know that there is 4 categories. There is the Lord, whom we devote ourselves to, the devotees, we befriend, the innocent, we share wisdom, and the envious, we keep away from. So there is a certain level of discernment that is required. So equality of vision means that when those who are Madhyama at this level, even so those who are envious, they keep it. So from the envious, we keep a distance. With the innocent, we try to share. We try to bless them with words. We befriend. With the Lord, we devote ourselves to the Lord. A certain level of differentiation. But it is all, the common denominator is still a service attitude. Even when we keep away from those who are envious. That is because if we speak about the Lord and His glories, they will only become more envious and they will become more offensive. So for their own good, we keep a distance from them and we may pray for them from a distance. So this is, so you could say third point is an elaboration, second point. That reciprocity of action, how will we do it? Depending on how that person receives. But say, for example, Srila Prabhupada, when he was buying the land in Juhu for building a temple. So the owner, they wanted to take the money and not give the land also. But then it became a huge battle. The owner passed away, then his wife hired some good hoodlums and tried to demolish the construction that we had over there. But when Prabhupada fought, Prabhupada said that if you want to steal Krishna's property, they'll have to go over my dead body. But finally she realized that she had dismissed and she realized that what she had done was foolish and she agreed. Prabhupada, we paid the money and she gave the land. So when the deal was signed for transfer of property, at that time she sought forgiveness. She said, Swamiji, please forgive me. And Prabhupada said, think nothing of it. You are just like my daughter, I'll take care of you. So when Prabhupada fought for the property, Prabhupada had no enmity at a personal level against her. And once the battle was over, Prabhupada saw her also as a soul. And he wanted to bless everyone. So he wanted to bless her also. Okay? Thank you. Any last question before we take a break? Yes, please.
Slightly technical question. You mentioned that from heaven, once you enjoy enough, you have to come back to earth and then go to the spiritual world. You can't go from heaven to spiritual world.
It's not that you can't go, but generally it doesn't happen. In heaven, there is so much enjoyment available that people in heaven are pious. And the devatas, they are not, they may enjoy material things, but they also have faith in the Supreme Lord, they worship the Supreme Lord. But there is the focus on the Lord is not there because there is so much enjoyment available. So the exclusive focus on the Lord, that because there is so much comfort and enjoyment available, it's difficult to have that. And that's why from there to go towards the spiritual world is difficult. It's like, say, we have a feast. We have feast, we'll naturally enjoy the feast. But if suppose we sit for a feast and then somebody tells you, okay, now sit and meditate for 1 hour. And meditate while keeping your eyes open and looking at the feast, but meditate. That's going to be very difficult. Now, is it possible? Maybe for some people it's possible. But the very presence of the sensual temptation will distract us from a spiritual meditation. So, heavens, there is so much enjoyment available that the focus on the Lord is difficult. And now, some cases it may be possible. Generally, we go there, enjoy, and come back to the earth, and from there one gets elevated. Okay. Thank you.
Just an extension to this. So, heaven, there might be a lot of material opulence, and hence might be difficult to exclusively focus on the Lord. But even higher planets like maybe Satyalok and Brahmalok, etc.
Well, they are different. Because Tapaloka, Jalaloka, Satyaloka, they are not focused on so much physical gratification so much. It's much more sattvic. So, from there, some people might be able to go to the Brahmaloka, and at the end of the universe, the Satyaloka might get liberated and go to the spiritual world. So see, the point is that ultimately going to the spiritual world is a matter of making the Lord as the ultimate object of our love. So you could say love is not limited by rules. But that doesn't mean there are no rules in love. Love is bigger than rules. So if somebody is fully devoted to the Lord, then from anywhere they can go to the spiritual world. But in general, the trajectory for purification, it involves a certain pathway where the love is most likely to be developed. It's like, can somebody from the ICU suddenly be discharged? Well, you can have miraculous regular recovery and somebody from the ICU is immediately discharged. But generally from the ICU, the person comes to general ward. From the general ward, then they are discharged. So the trajectory is that when the mind is too infatuated with material things, then it's very difficult to focus on the spiritual. So on the earthly planetary system, there is a balance where there is pleasure and there is pain. And that leads one to have the best chance for focusing on the spiritual domain. Okay, thank you. Gaurav, do you want to make any comments, corrections?
Great. Persistence and abstinence.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was a very fascinating description of the chapter 6. In fact, most people feel that chapter 6 speaks about Hatha Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and Prabhupada keeps giving commentaries on Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah.
And somebody wrote a book, Bhagavad Gita as it was.
Yes.
It was a criticism of Prabhupada's commentary, and based on that, Shivaram Maharaj has written a book called Bhakti Vedanta Purpose.
Yes.
So I think if any of you go online and are interested to understand more, I think based on this chapter only the objections mainly came.
Main objection.
And the rebuttal from Shivaram Maharaj is very interesting. It is one of my favorite books, Shivaram Maharaj's Bhakti Vedanta Purpose. And very technically written and very wonderful. So I had read it, I had first studied it in the late 90s, Bhakti Vedanta Purpose.
Yes, I think you had mentioned that it's very difficult to find an audience where you can speak that book.
I can speak with you. Thank you so much. It was very fascinating.
Thank you so much for your kind words. So, Prabhupada's approach to the Gita, we'll discuss that in our last session when we come to Sarvadharman Prityaja, what Prabhupada is doing in his Bhagavad Gita purports also. So, thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakti.
Just a short break of 10 minutes. See you all at 11:45. 11:45.